Thanks everyone for giving up some of your valuable time for this presentation. What I'm going to do today is take you through a slide deck about developing technical excellence in glide shot put. What we've done at England Athletics is put together a technical excellence framework, which is a tool for you guys to use to target your technical development processes with athletes, assess where they are at the moment, but also give you some pointers on what we feel are key technical aspects that will make a good shot putter. So before wasting any more time, this is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to take you through an intro to the technical excellence framework, explain a little bit about what it is, look at the phases of the throw. We're going to break that down into preparation, drive, airborne, transition, and delivery, and look at some individual technical points within each one of those different phases. Look at how you can assess those phases and use it in a scoring matrix and what that means to you and how you can help focus your technical development processes. Then finally, finish off with some philosophy and application of the framework and a little bit of Q&A. And so let's move on to the meat of the presentation. First of all, a little bit of explanation and setting the scene a bit for our technical excellence framework. First of all, it's not really a style guide. This framework's been put in place so whatever your style or favored approach to shot put should fit within this technical framework. And what we're really talking about here are some key fundamental considerations that will be applicable to most styles that will produce an effective athlete in the glide shot put. What I would say is I'll add one big caveat here. There are always going to be outliers here. There's going to be one or two athletes that are going to will not meet the technical framework in one or two spots, but will still deliver really good performances because, as we know, athletics is a sport of one, and although we have general technical models in place, there's always going to be one person that kind of bucks the trend. I would also say this is a living document, and if you want to get the document, send me an email at the end of this. I know some of you already got this. Send it to me. I'm happy to send out, and we're really happy to provide feedback and have discussions around this as we update this with what we see from the global shot put community, as well as what we're getting feedback from our local community as well. I would say it's a good triage tool and it's a good guidance tool, but it's only a tool. So it's great at identifying the areas of what you need to develop and the areas that are going to have the biggest bang for your buck in developing technical excellence. What it doesn't do is help you actually make the positive interventions with those athletes. That's really where your core skills of observation, intervention, and then kind of helping the athlete understand where their model's moving really come into play. Lastly, this is going to be seeing extensive use on the youth talent program and also on the junior talent programs, where we'll be using this to evaluate athletes as they go through their development phases from around 17 through to hopefully around 22, 23 when they exit JTP into something like the futures or performance program with British Athletics or into the senior talent program with England. So this is a foundational work that hopefully will make a lot of sense to you guys when we get into it. So briefly mentioned this, so I'll go through these quite quickly. We break down the throw into 6 aspects: the preparation, the drive, airborne, transition, delivery, and overall. And I'll go through all of these in order as we go through. And I've got videos of both an elite athlete and also a beginner athlete where I can illustrate how we would go through the processes looking at these. So we've got David Stall as an elite glider. And we've also got Lily Carlaw, my daughter, who's a non-elite glider, but it's a really interesting process to apply the same framework to both of these and have a look at kind of what it means to us in terms of where we'd focus our attention. Within each one of these phases, we have 3 coaching points. The 3 coaching points are generally aligned to a body area. Point 1 is the head and trunk. Point 2 are the arms and hands, and point 3 are the legs, hips, and feet. So that allows you to understand clearly what we're looking for in terms of the technical and positional achievements of those athletes as they transition between phases or they actually adopt during a more static phase, in terms of what we're looking for in terms of their alignment to the direction of the throw, but also maybe towards the degree from the direction of the throw. Last one on explaining it. What we do then is we score each of the technical points in each phase. So for preparation, you can score a maximum of 3 points. And if you score a maximum of 3 points, so your head's right, your arms are right, your trunk's right, and your legs, hips, and feet are right, you'll get 3 points, and that means you're green. That's a really good phase for you. So your preparation phase is pretty nailed. We don't need to do much work there. And then when we put this all together, we get an overall rating where we can look at and say, like, oh, definitely your drive phase is the thing that's letting you down. We need to work on that. Or it could be the drive phase and your legs are letting you down. That's where we need to work. And it really allows you to how to connect all these things together. And what I'll do is right at the end, I'll give you an example of how you can do this. So on that note, let's move on. And what we'll talk about now is we're going to go through each one of the different 6 phases and take you through some examples of what we're looking for with the 3 different body areas in each one of these phases, show you a video, and then we'll move on to the next phase. Hopefully that will clearly illustrate kind of what we're looking for. So I'll take a little time to go through these. First one, we're looking at the head and trunk. So head, shoulders. So this is the preparation phase. So this is the starting position to the peak drop. So before I go through these, let me just quickly show you the video that I've got prepared for this. So I'm sorry that there's probably going to be a little bit of jumping around here. So this is what we call the preparation phase. So from there to peak drop. So I'll play that again quickly. One last time. Go back to the presentation. So when we looked at that, what we were looking to see are head, shoulders, and chest facing 180 degrees away from the direction of the throw. The line of the shoulders and the hips parallel to the floor, essentially to give us a nice parallel and linear drive phase out the back. The head is positioned, the head position is relaxed, eyes are looking to the rear of the circle. So why do we say eyes looking to the rear of the circle, not directly under them? Generally to provide a nice straight back and a nice straight thoracic position when you're coming out the back of the circle. The left arm fully extended, relaxed, and in front of the left hip. So relaxed and in front of the left hip could be up high towards the rear of the circle, or it could be dropping to the floor, very much like what we saw from David Stool there. But essentially what we're looking for is the left arm in front of the left hip. Right hand holding the shot in the neck with a high elbow. The third one, talking about the legs and hips, the center of mass is pretty much over the right leg, as that's your support leg, and this assumes it's a right-handed thrower. The right leg flexes, hips begin to sink towards the direction of throw and the stop board. And what I've got here is a couple of images just to illustrate that. So this is on the position on the left is like kind of the peak position. So when it's at its highest from the floor, and on the image on the right there is what we're seeing from the peak drop. So that's fundamentally quite close to where we're seeing the end of that preparation phase. Nice and tight, left arm in front of left hip, a little bit rounded in his back, but not excessively. The hips and the shoulders, importantly, are square and parallel to the floor. The head's raised a little bit, so he's not crunched too under, but a nice compact position from where he can transition into the drive phase. Right, I'm going to try and scroll to the next slide. So after we've gone through the preparation phase, the next phase what we're going to look at is the drive phase. So the drive phase, now this is where it gets a little bit more complicated in one area. So the first one is head, shoulders, and chest. That's pretty much similar to the first video we showed, where head, shoulders, and chest facing 180 degrees away from the direction of the throw, head relaxed, eyes looking to the rear. Same with the left arm. But probably the thing to highlight here is when we're looking at arms and hands, the shot is positioned in line or behind the right hip. So if you think about the shot rotating around the body at some point and then going to the front of the circle, the shot is positioned behind or in line with the right hip. Now, When we look at the drive phase, this is probably the most important part of it, is what happens to the lower body from hips and below. Hips drop back towards the direction of throw. The athlete creates a 90-90, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And it's basically where the right leg is bent approximately 90 degrees, and so is the left. And I'll give some good reasons why that. The sole of the foot is pointing directly towards the direction of throw. Right leg fully extends, and left leg fully extends downwards to the stop board. So let me just show you the videos on this one. So as we can see in this one, David actually does achieve a 90-90, and I'll show you that in a minute. He's got full extension of both legs. The left arm is still in front of the left hip. Some athletes will look for a longer left arm as they transition across the circle to use it as a braking aspect to the upper body, so it doesn't over rotate and open up too much. Others will look to keep it quite tight to the body, like Valerie Adams and David here, in order to aid the momentum going across the circle, but also prepare for the next phase of the throw. But essentially, the bit we're looking at here is driving off the left heel, full extension of both legs after achieving a 90-90 position coming out the back. That will mean that effectively, as an athlete, rather than transferring excessive amounts of force up and then down, where you're going to lose force and energy at the top of the throw and then actually absorb energy at the bottom as you land and then try and get into the delivery phase, or the transition phase in this case, we're looking at a more efficient movement across the circle that's very horizontal in nature and linear, which is kind of the aim of the game here, as soon as we're looking at a linear technique for shot put. So I'm going to go quickly back to the presentation. So what we do is we review a couple of stills here. So these are the stills taken from the video we've just gone through here. And what you can clearly see here on the left-hand side is that 90-90 position from David Stoll, which means that as he's sitting back and moving towards the stop board, a lot of his weight is actually going to be traveling in a more horizontal direction rather than going up and down. And in the second picture, which we also saw in the finish point on that video, right foot up, heel on the floor, so he's driving off his right heel, full extension of his right leg, full extension of his left leg. So next we start looking at the airborne phase. So this phase is from when the right foot comes off the back of the circle, off the heel that we just saw there, to the right foot coming down. Again, head, shoulders, chest facing at 180 degrees away from the direction of the throw. Head position is relaxed. Eyes are looking to the rear of the circle. The left arm is fully extended, pointing somewhere between 120 and 180 degrees as the right foot touches the floor. So that's somewhere between kind of half the 9 o'clock position on the circle to the 12 o'clock, if the 12 o'clock is the rear of the circle. Right hand holding the shot high in the neck with a high elbow. Shot positioned in line or behind the right hip. The third part of this, when we're looking at the legs and the feet and the hips, is the right leg transfers from that heel push off the back of the circle rapidly under the right hip and lands dorsiflexed and at 90 degrees to the direction of the throw. The left leg is fully extended towards the stop board, not over the stop board, but towards the stop board. I'll go to the video on this one now. So we can see David pulling his right foot under his body there. Left arm is facing towards the rear of the circle. The left leg is traveling towards the stop board, not over it, but actually looking to land near the stop board. And the right hand holding the shot put is behind the right hip. So the only thing I would say here is his foot is slightly different towards 90 degrees to the throw. You see a lot of different positions here with the right foot. So I know there's a lot of athletes will look to have the right foot facing nearly towards the rear of the circle, which will provide a very long transition path as you rotate into the delivery. And David's somewhere between 90 and that kind of 180 degree position. Again, we think that 90 degrees is the optimum position because it makes life a lot easier for the athlete to drive into that the delivery phase as they start rotating the foot, knee, and hip process round and into the delivery. But as an athlete becomes more proficient at this, there may be a case that foot may move round a little bit depending on kind of their style of throw. So let's look at that again. And I'll go back to the presentation now. I'm very sorry about this. The videos I originally planned, I imported a slow motion where you could see actually quite a lot more than you can in these ones. But importing them into the tool has turned them into a fast video. So hence I tried to put these stills in so you can see the picture. So again, this is at the end of the airborne phase. What you see here with David is the fact that he's landing, the foot is dorsiflexed, the weight is over the right, left arm to the rear of the circle, shot behind the right hip, left foot going down to the circle, to the stop board, sorry, not the circle. So this is one of those phases that's quite interesting when you look at shot put. It's probably the shortest phase in probably any event when you look at it, but it's also one of those ones that is extremely fraught with problems here. And what we see is a lot of athletes are actually concentrating more and more on the transition phase in terms of its impact on not only kind of the actual positions that the athletes meet, but the speed of the shot as it transfers through the different phases. And actually, this is the phase where more speed and velocity in the shot can be lost than probably most others. And this is one of those ones where it happens really fast, but really deserves a lot of attention. So what do we mean by the transition phase? And in simplest terms, it's from when the right foot touchdown happens to the left foot touchdown happens. And what you'll see later in the presentation when we look at one of our non-elite athletes doing this, that you can actually clearly see some of the impact of the drive airborne transition phase not being quite right, and what that does in terms of some of the body positions and the inertia built into the throw. So let's have a look at this. Head, shoulders, chest facing 100 to 180 degrees away from the direction of the throw. So what we're looking at here is when the athlete lands, we'll see the head and shoulders not necessarily being always at the rear of the circle. What we begin to see with a lot of elite male shot putters is that position changes significantly. And what you begin to see is that in order to reduce the inertia built in the transition phase and trying to keep the velocity on the shot, far more open landing positions in order to allow for a more aggressive strike. So much more open. The shot is still relatively far behind the right hip, but the body itself is a little bit more open. Left arm fully extended and pointed between 100 and 180 degrees from the direction of throw. So if an athlete you want huge amounts of separation, and athletes maybe less trading on speed and more on brute strength and power, you may want to look at more separation in order to allow them to actually use that torque they're building in their body more effectively. If they are, I would say, more of a more athletic speed, explosive shot putter, less separation and maybe closer to that 100-degree separation is something that could be considered. The shot should still be positioned in line or behind the right hip. And when you look at Wilco Shah, who's David Stall's coach, at this point, what he's looking for is the shot to be roughly over his right foot, which means that it's in line with his right hip. Left foot touches down with hips 90 degrees to the direction of the throw. Center of mass remains over the right foot, whilst the right hip, knee, foot complex rotates upwards and towards the direction of throw. So what we're looking at here is as you're landing, although you're left landing, your body weight is still over your right, your center of mass stays there. Both feet should at this point be facing 90 degrees from the front. And then upon landing, we see a fast reaction into that right leg beginning to turn. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you an extremely short video of this transition phase. There we go. I know it's short, I apologize. So I'll play it a few times. This is cutting off a little bit short. I might be able to roll this forward a little bit. No, I'm sorry about this. The tool has not been helpful in my videos. So we're nearly there. David actually lands on this throw with his foot slightly up on the inside of the board anyway. But I think what you can see from this is clearly how his left foot will eventually, if the video would allowed me to do it, come down facing 90 degrees roughly away from the direction of the throw. Its hips are facing 90 degrees away, left arm is still to the rear, and the ball is behind his right hip. So I'm going to transition back to the presentation now. So I apologize for this to and froing, but unfortunately the tool does not allow us to embed videos into presentations either. So let's go back to here. So this is a better picture. I managed to capture this from the video. So what you see here is David, when we talked earlier about this 100 to 180 degree left arm position in relation to the direction of the throw, you can clearly see this in operation here. His left foot is closer to, is actually touching the side of the board here, foot facing 90 degrees away from the direction of the throw, right foot 90 degrees, ball behind the right hip. Left arm is probably around about 100 degrees at the point of actually when it landed. So what you're seeing here is David really looking at a quick transition from right to left so he doesn't bleed inertia off the put and trade on the speed that he naturally has as an athlete. Excellent. I'll move on to the next. Let's move on to the delivery phase. And now this is the last but one phase that we'll look at before we go into some of the tool aspects about how we can measure, put this all together and kind of what this really means. So first of all, delivery phase from left foot touchdown to the release of the ball. I think most of this is fairly obvious. The trunk extends, chest points to the sky in the direction of the throw. Head is upright, eyes are looking up over the direction of the throw. The right arm extends forward, up over the stop board. Right wrist flicks the shot with the thumb pointing down. Left arm pulled tight to the trunk. Now, tight to the trunk could mean I wouldn't say it's directly next to the trunk, but it's effectively a strong decelerated left side of the body to enable the right side to accelerate around it. The right hip knee foot complex continues to rotate forward up until facing the direction of the throw. The right hand maintains contact with the shot as it accelerates through a full extension of the arm. The shot should be released at an angle of 35 to 40 degrees. Left hip knee foot complex creates a strong pivot with a tensed but slightly flexed left knee, left foot on the floor, but not with the heel down and left foot pointing towards the direction of the throw. So a strong left side, again, decelerating fast to enable a rapid acceleration of the right. Slightly flexed left knee in order to allow the athlete to get over that leg more effectively. And the foot creating a very stable contact with the floor and allowing power to be transferred through the delivery phase. So let's have a look at this with David. Let's have a look at that again. See if I can do it on rotate. One last time. So we can see clearly on the final position, David, this is a fixed foot throw. In this case, left leg slightly bent, tall, chest to the sky, especially I think I'm going to bring it back to about here. I'll show you actually in some steals, but strong, both feet in contact with the floor where they're still holding the ball. Left foot pointing in the direction of the throw, left arm rapidly decelerating the torso to enable the right arm to come through and the right side of the body to become very active and powerful, and ultimately a very strong putting position. One thing you could say is maybe he's tucked that left elbow in a little bit tight, and his shoulder girdle and his hip girdle are not completely parallel, but that's not part of the framework anyway, so potentially that's an area where he might want to look at. But go back to the presentation. So I've got a couple of pictures here, 3 slides. So you can see here that the beginning of the right and left, the left arm coming out, creating a stretch reflex across the chest. The ball is still very much behind the right hip. The right knee, foot, and hip process is beginning to turn. And on the final slide there, you can clearly see chest up, head up, very hard braced left arm. Actually, it's not too tight to the chest. You can clearly see it in these pictures. It's actually quite way away from the chest, but nice and strong. And ultimately, a very strong power position to actually deliver the ball in. Encompassing the whole movement. So when we first created these frameworks, we did a lot of work on kind of what the individual phases actually meant, and kind of how would we try and capture something that doesn't actually talk to a style, but talks to fundamentals that a style can be pushed around. But one of the things we kind of got to at one point was the fact that when we did this, that somebody could have done all the right things and gotten all the right positions in the wrong order, and it didn't have aggression, it didn't have flow, and that meant that overall the throw wasn't that great. So what we did is we went back and added another phase, which is we called the overall phase, where we could try and encompass some of those less apparent aspects, but are probably incredibly important. So what we're looking at here is an overall assessment of the throw, and did the throw kind of meet 3 key criteria. First of all, rhythm. Did the throw exhibit a rhythmical element? Did it flow? Were there no awkward pauses or periods, or when the movement was staccato? Did the athlete start, stop? Did it look like one flowing movement? And I think that's something that when you see some of the best athletes, and I'm sure some of you guys who have thrown shot put, your best throws sometimes feel like your most effortless because the movement's flowing, it doesn't stop, there's no bleeds of inertia or force from the shot, the velocity doesn't drop off the shot at times. So rhythm, big part of it. Second one, sequence. So it's making sure that all the elements of the throw were sequenced in the correct order, and typically that's legs, trunk, arms, in kind of that order. So are we seeing the flow of the activity happen in the right order, or are we seeing some timing issues where we're seeing trunk activation before hip activation, for example? That would be a massive indicator where there's probably a sequence issue. Lastly, intent. The throw demonstrated an acceleration through all elements with no static phase or minimal deceleration. Most importantly, the implement builds speed throughout the throw and leaves the hand at the point of highest velocity. The delivery was aggressive and explosive. So ultimately, this is what really shot put is about, is making sure, and in fact, any throwing, is that the implement leaves your hand at the point of highest velocity, and ultimately, the technique that you put in place in order to give you the outcome you want is something that should be built around A, not dropping any speed or velocity off the implement, B, making sure that you have enough acceleration path so you can continually accelerate the implement, and C, allows you to release the implement at the point of highest velocity. So ultimately, that's the big goal, and that's what we've done trying to put this framework together. So let me show you a video of David overall before we go into kind of the tool as well, and then apply this to a junior athlete. So I've got to go back to the videos again. I apologize for all this backwards and forwards. Again, let's have a look. So this is the full throw that we've just analyzed. I'll put it on repeat so we can see a little bit more of it because it's a little bit longer. So you can see clearly a lot of the elements we've talked about: left arm activity, drop to the board, 90-90, full extension, hips landing 90 degrees direction of the throw, ball behind the hip or in line with hip. Interestingly, at this point, it's good to see kind of the emphasis, and I know David's done a lot of work on this and continues to do work on this, is the transition phase where you see that slight bit of inertia in the shot before both feet are on the floor and it accelerates it again. That's a big focus area for, I know these guys are working on, but again, really interesting to see it in full flow. So I'm going to close this up now and start giving you some context of kind of what the framework would look like, and then put it into practice with a junior athlete. Right, so what we're doing now is I'm going to take you through kind of the scoring matrix to give you a picture of kind of how you can use the framework to give you an understanding of where you need to apply some of your technical excellence and your experience in order to improve the athlete's performance. Scoring matrix. So at the end of the framework document that we've got, there's a scoring matrix. So it looks like this. On the left-hand side, you have all the phases, and then you have point 1, point 2, point 3. So point 1 is the head and trunk, point 2, arms and hands, point 3, legs, hips and feet. And then we have the result that we score between 1 and 3, as I kind of mentioned before. So what this allows you to do, so if you look at, say, point 1, if you've got a consistent issue where you're not scoring any points, so if you get 1 point in each one, that means you're green. If you get 0, 1 and 1, so if you get 0 in point 1, 1 point in point 2, 1 point in point 3, that's like an amber. If you get nothing in all three, that's a red. But there's also, if you get nothing in point 1 all the way through, that says that's also red. So that would say that you've got problems with your head and trunk. And kind of like a matrix, if we see issues in each one of the different phases, say airborne, you could have 0, 0, 0. That would mean your airborne phase needs work. But if you go through the matrix and look at a video of one of your athletes, you can clearly work out which one of these areas are key for you to work on. And what we're going to do now is put that into practice and have a look at one of the athletes that I coach and try and kind of identify those areas. And what I'll do is I'll show you the scoring matrix we put together for her and what that means in terms of how that's being applied to her physical prep and also her technical development program. So what I'll do is I'm just going to blast through all of the videos this time, and then what we'll do is we'll come back to the presentation after that just to have a look through the scoring matrix. So I'm going to show you the video of the full glide first. So this is Lily. She's a 15-year-old shot putter, been shot putting for a couple of years now. These throws here were in the region of 1590 to 1620 whole session, and as you can see, pretty decent shot putter for her age, but there's clearly something wrong there. Apart from the fact that she has to put up with me as her coach, we've got some work to do. And although the movement flows and everything, there's definitely a problem with the middle of that throw. So let's take a look at each one of the elements bit by bit and have a look at kind of where we're seeing some of the deficiencies. Back to the. So let's have a look at a prep phase. So I'll put that on. So when we look at her prep phase from start to peak drop, what we're going to see is that her weight does drop back. Her left arm is in front of the left hip. Probably a right elbow could be a tad higher, but it's still high enough. And and she does fall back towards the shot. So that's a pretty decent prep phase. So I won't labour that anymore. We'll go to the next phase, which is the drive phase. Now the drive phase is where we start to see some problems occurring. I'll try and do that on a repeat for you. It's a little bit epileptic for Lily there. So I think this picture clearly shows you where you can see some of the problems in her drive phase. So if you look at what she's doing here, she's getting full extension, yes, but the problem she's got, she's still on her toe, not on her left hip. And not once in this process does she actually manage a 90-90, because even here she's beginning to come out of that tucked position too early, which means that her energy travel is going to be up and down rather than more direct across the circle. And you'll see the impact of that in the next phases. So this is where the problem starts. She's not getting up onto that heel. She's not falling back enough. And that 90-90 position that we talked about earlier is a great indication that the athlete's staying low across the circle and then will be able to naturally come up on that heel in order to create a more horizontal drive profile. So let's go to airborne phase next. So have a look at the airborne phase again. So when we look at her landing here, this is a good position to stop it at. What we see here is landing. I wouldn't say that it's dorsiflexed. Her foot is pretty much up on its toe there. If she's up that far on her toe, she's not likely to have an athletically braced foot. It means that she's going to absorb a lot of energy and slow the transition phase down as she gets into a more powerful position on that limb so that she can then exert power again. Her upper body seems pretty decent position, looking towards the rear, left arm towards the rear. She's building good torque in her body. Right foot is the problem here, facing not 90 degrees, and it's up on its toe. You can see that the effect of that high transition is that she's now got to absorb huge amounts of energy on that. Maybe that's why she's on her toe to a certain degree. There are probably other reasons, and I'll come to that in a minute. And then secondarily, if you look at her left foot, very high in relation to where the stop board is, and partially again due to that very high transfer across the circle, born from the fact that she didn't hit that 90-90 position and get a nice horizontal profile. And what you'll see next is kind of what happens as a result. Again, this is probably one of the shortest videos. So if you look at that transition phase, there's a great example of kind of where we're seeing her. So if you look at that left foot, she actually fails the throw here. That high transition means she landed on top of the board and rolled her foot under it. And that ain't a healthy ankle position to have. The right foot still has not started turning through that process. And she's already started this very open position with a left arm. The ball is actually not in a bad position. Lily's saved by the fact that she has an extremely fast right foot, knee, hip process, which means she gets back in front of the ball again. But effectively what she's done by having that very loopy transition out the back and that I would say unathletic landing in the middle means that she's missed the left foot position, and it's slowed the transition phase down so that the ball gets so far in front of it, she's got to work really hard to get back in front of it again in order to be able to drive that hip through and then get some more torque back in the body so she can apply force to the ball in a more conventional way. Also, look at this position. You can see that a hip and shoulder girdle isn't in a great position. She's not got that straight line from foot to head. It's a very bowed position. In some styles that would look good, so an over the top thrower, this could be something you might typically see more often than not, but Lily's really not an over the top thrower. But herein lies kind of the problems we identified in those three phases. I'll close this off and we'll finish it off with the delivery phase. Let's have a look at that again. You can also see in that phase, that delivery, that she loses some of the linearity of the event. She's actually going too far around with her right foot, caused by some of the activity of her hip and left and her upper body to a certain degree, coming through too early because of the force up to observe and absorb through the middle of in a lower body, and kind of what that's done in terms of the timing of that delivery. So that missed drive phase at the back has caused a chain reaction of events that has caused her to actually end up with a good put, but not an optimum put. So at that point, let me just go back to the presentation. I don't know where that is. And I promise you, that's the last of the flipping backwards and forwards. So what I did then is, as I put this scoring matrix together for Lily, and this is what I scored. So I was a little bit lenient on her because she is my daughter and I might get in trouble. What we've got here is where she's done something right, I've put a tick. Where she's done, a plus point, because I couldn't find tick on PowerPoint, I apologize. And when she did something bad, I put a negative. So you can see here that all of the negatives have come in point 3, which is the legs, hips and feet, and they've come in the drive, airborne and transition phase. So this has clearly showed me that the drive, airborne and transition phase are the areas that I need to work on her technically in order to have the best impact on her shot put technique and overall outcomes. Looking at the videos and going back and then assessing that and applying coaching knowledge, fundamentally the big problem starts when she can't get into that 90-90 position and then drive off the right heel. Now, went back, we did some functional mobility screening on Lily, and we found out that she has 2 big areas which are causing her some problems. She had, or 3 actually, which are 2 of which are related. Her right hip flexor and right quadricep were very tight, and she had limited mobility in a right ankle versus a left ankle. So we put into place some exercises for her to work through some mobility and some rolling, some release activity around those areas before she throws, but also concentrating on building those into a preparation phase to include her overall ability to actually be able to support those positions. And then from a technical standpoint, as we built physical competency in her to be able to adopt those positions without a physical limitation, we've started now working and isolating those phases with some band work and also some drive to power position, and also a lot of dry drills to make sure that she's getting comfortable with the mechanics of that new movement profile. So this is a real world example of how we've utilized this technical framework to enable us to go back, assess an athlete that's good and competent, but not optimized, and applying it back again. I would say that as an athlete gets older, you can get more stringent on kind of the things you're looking for. You can get a little bit more precise and nitpicky on positions in order to really get them tuned into what the model you want to go in there. But you can also understand that in certain circumstances, there's going to be cases where an athlete falls outside the normative range, and you may want to discard one of these points and say, yeah, I know, but they're never going to be able to do that, so I'll have to find a way to coach around it. But 90% of the time, this is a good model for you to use in order to triage your athlete, understand where the development phases, the technical phases are going wrong, and also get a good picture on where you as a coach can have your biggest bang for your buck in terms of improving their performance areas. So with that in mind, I'm just going to sum up on my last slide before we go to Q&A and talk a little bit about the philosophy and application of the framework, and just share a few ideas that have worked for me, and I've talked to other coaches that also adopt similar styles. So first of all, analyze frequently. There's things that you're going to do with your athletes that are going to mean that you're your athlete will perform differently at different times. It could be the phase of preparation plan they're in. It could be mental. It could be lifestyle related. But getting a good picture on kind of what their technical development looks like on a regular basis, and by regular, it could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be annually, but probably around 3 to 6 months. Is a good habit to get in. The more experienced coaches here have a really strong technical model in their minds. And with that, they're probably going to be in a position where they're doing this on a session by session basis anyway. But for those of us that are developing our knowledge, this is a great way and a good framework to get in the habit of using. I would say overlay your style on top of this. These are fundamental kind of guidances around biomechanical positions that should be hit to enable competent shot putting. I think on top of this, each one of your athletes will have a style, and you'll have a coaching style that should be best for those best for those individual situations. So apply your style to it. I would say address the causes, not the outcomes. So we saw with Lily that there was something wrong with her delivery phase. Her foot hit the board wrong. She created quite a lot of inertia, and the timing was slightly out. Rather than addressing at that point there, we took 2 steps back and looked at the root cause, which was clearly identified by the tool, which was that drive phase coming out the back and fundamentally not being able to get to that 90-90 and drive off of the right foot, which created a more loopy transition. So that was an example of us taking the step backwards to look at the causes, not outcomes. In terms of correcting and kind of how you prioritize your interventions as a coach, I would say 2 rules that have worked for me is floor to ceiling. So if you've got issues with the legs before you've got the arms, I would say start working legs and hips and knees first before you start working arms, trunk, and head. There are certain circumstances where the 2 are linked. So for glide shot put, that left arm coming out the back of the circle can have a material effect on where the hips land. Things like that are worth considering. And I also say back to front. So start at the back of the circle, get competent at the preparation and drive phase first before you start addressing the transition and delivery. That's because you never know. When you make changes at the back, it will materially affect what happens in the middle, and that will then again affect what happens at the front. One of the things that is paramount is help the athlete understand. The sooner as the athlete starts feeling the positions and where they're feeling mismatches with the technical model you're trying to impart to them, that's going to make your life so much easier as a coach. One thing that's helped me recently is not getting too technical with the athlete. Our job is to take the technical information, distill it into something that we can communicate effectively and get the athlete to understand. So that sometimes feelings, flow, actions are more important to the athlete than they are to talk about 90 degrees to the direction of the throat. That's our job, to take that complex notion and turn it into something simple. And my final point of the presentation is to say, quick call to action. Go and apply this framework to an athlete you coach. And I'll say, what do you see? Come and feed it back to us. We really want to hear what you have to say. We want to collaborate around this and develop this as a tool that we can create best of breed processes for shot putting. And that is my presentation. So thank you very much, everybody. There's my email if you want to shoot me stuff, or if you want to get hold of the frameworks, I'm happy to send them to you. Just send me a note. And Nick, I think it's time for questions.
Yeah, that was great, Stuart. Thanks for that. So there's quite a few questions in, so I'm going to try, if I go to the questions bit, I'll try and publish them onto the main screen. I've got 7 in so far. So first question was in from Thomas. So just wanting some support, some advice around selecting that diameter of shot put. So give an example of a 6 foot tall athlete throwing a 7.26.
I mean, that's really hard to say in terms of kind of the athlete without knowing what their hand size is. It's kind of weird. I coach 6 shot putters now, and I've got ones with big hands that like small shot puts, ones with small hands that like big shot puts. It really comes down to the individual feel of the athlete. And I would say a couple of things would spring to mind to look at here is, can it fit neatly into their neck and they don't feel uncomfortable with that? Can they get good contact with predominantly the ball of the hand around kind of this area where it's in their neck, so that they can transfer force effectively through the forearm and the two bones in the forearm through the wrist and into those digits. And I would say it really comes down to personal preference. A lot of the athletes that I am working with, it's more about feel than it is about size, and that's something that's also important. So I would suggest there's no hard and fast rule. Everyone's different. I haven't met anyone that's kind of said the same thing in a number of times. I would say go out and try them, find out, experiment.
Good advice. Next question we had from Bob. So Bob was asking about, let's see if I can pin that and then I can send it out. Bob, where have you gone? Here he goes. Right, publish. Is it still best to throw from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock? So when I asked him, he was referring to it as his 12 o'clock is the back of the circle.
So 11 to 5, I mean, I think the only thing that I would say that we would refer to like that 11 to 5 profile of movement would be your left leg from the peak drop position to left foot drive coming out the back. I'd also say be very careful on that, because one of the key relationships you'd look for when a shot putter's landing is the left toe to right heel. So you want to have them roughly in line, so that will create a very narrow angle for the right hip to go almost over the top of the left to give you a great trajectory and push on the ball. So I would say the 11 to 5 is a good coaching tool to get, I would say, intermediate and beginner throwers used to kind of what their left leg should be doing out the back of the circle. But I would also be careful on monitoring the offset between those 2 feet at landing, and then kind of what that kick does in terms of, one of the big concerns is that you don't want to have a left side dominant kick out the back. It should be a lot more right leg before the left leg even comes in. If you start talking 11 to 5 and getting them focused on kick, you'll end up with a lot of athletes that do what Lily did in that thing, which is a nice loopy up and down, and you'll get them kick dominant rather than push dominant at the back, and their right foot gets lazy, doesn't get to the middle of the circle quick enough, doesn't get underneath the body weight transfers onto the left foot, and then you end up falling out the front of the circle or depowering the right knee hip process. So just be careful of that specific activity. Use it as a guide to get them started, and then get them thinking about kind of where they want to be landing their feet, what that feels like, what their hip positions feel like on landing, and really focus on those areas.
Okay, thank you. Great question. One from Marianne. One of our athletes tends to throw the shot as a cricket player, and she wants some advice around how she can correct that delivery. So
probably one of the most successful shot putters that we know today was a really avid cricketer, and that's Tom Walsh. He used to play cricket a lot, and if you look at Tom Walsh's throw, there's 2 things that are really significant about Tom Walsh. He's got a high kick out the back, and he blows his left arm away quite aggressively. The left arm blowing away was caused by him being a bowler at cricket, and he used to basically throw his left arm away to bowl the ball, and he's kept it in his shot, but it's his characteristic. It's hidden. He can't transfer it out. But when we're looking at delivery with the right arm, I would say there's a couple of things that, as a cricket type throw, is not conducive to shot put, because dropping that right elbow and really changes the different. You depower the throw. You can't get enough. You can't get the force delivery behind the ball, because you've not got a linear position with the arm at the final flick of delivery, and you use different muscle processes. I would say 2 things. First of all, med ball work with 2 hands on, so that they're forced to hold the med ball, focusing with the thumb the floor, and the high elbow holding the med ball, so they can't easily let go and drop. I would also say lots of med ball into the wall work with maybe less support on the left hand. The one that's worked as well for me in the past is getting somebody to put into the floor directly below them, but focusing on keeping a high elbow. And when they finish, there's the right thumb is to the floor, so putting it into the floor just to change the behavior and get them more used to a higher elbow position with a thumb down on delivery.
Okay, great answer. So question from Joe Wayne. So you mentioned earlier in your presentation about an over-the-top thrower. So you just want to know a little bit more about what you meant by that, I think, as a term.
Yeah, so it's really about where the path of the ball is and where it goes. So Jeff Capes is an extremely successful over the top thrower, one of the nation's best that we've ever produced. When you look at the way that he puts the ball, it's more that it travels a higher trajectory over the top of the body rather than coming round and through. You have to be extremely strong to do it, very powerful and extremely explosive, and that's why it's really hard for every athlete to accomplish. There's a lot of good athletes in this country are working to that model and are going to do a good job on it, but it's harder to achieve without significantly good genetics, I would say, because it requires you to have a very, very strong push over the top of the body.
So you've got to choose your parents carefully.
Absolutely.
Next one in, so just one from Bill, so asking if we can show the 1990 position again. So do you want to flag up that video? Run through
let me show the still. It's probably easier because the video is like as much use as a chocolate teapot. It was a lot slower when I delivered it, when I put it into the tool. I have to say that. I think it's this one here. So this is the 1990 position here. So the right foot, you can't see his right leg because it's hidden somewhat under the body, but his femur is parallel to the ground with a 90-degree bend on his right leg down onto the floor. His left leg is vertical to the floor with a horizontal shin. So that's what we call the 1990 position. Let me see if I can't do it. It's a PDF, sorry. I was going to see if I can blow it up for you, but I can't.
Hopefully that's been clear enough for him to be able to see that anyway. I think that should be fine. Is there anything else you want to go on 1990, or should I go to the next question?
No, I think that's good enough.
Okay, so one in from Paul. Lily is spinning out on the delivery. What do you recommend for young throwers? So I think that's like kind of a common one that lots of people see. So have you got any recommendations for that?
So this comes down to this is an issue I see that is a problem for her. That throw was far too rotational on delivery. So what's happened with Lily? So ultimately, what you want is a linear. The shot to travel in as straight a path as possible from the back of the circle when you're in your preparation phase to the point that leaves your fingers at the front. When you look at the ball path on elite athletes, it's nearly straight. There's sometimes a little bump when it comes round the body in the middle. But essentially it's pretty straight. What we're seeing with Lily here is that because she hit the middle and had a long transition time with her legs because she had to do a lot of force absorption as she went up and down, her left arm has got massively active too early. The ball's getting in front of her hip, so she's got a rotational element being brought into her upper body before her legs can get a linear punch through the throw. So that creates kind of this imbalance in her body, and our upper body dictates the pain and movement rather than her lower body, and that means that she's rotating through the throw. Ideally what we would see is her being able to stay more passive on her upper body because she'll have a faster transition period. That way her leg, and what we'd ideally be looking for is that right foot to come punching through, a right hip knee foot process to come punching through, and a right foot to land pretty much dead center of the stop board at the front. That means that her legs have traveled through a very linear phase. Her upper body would then have a more linear process to its delivery phase. And ultimately what we won't see is that rotational element, which will bleed force off of the shot. Because if you look at that video, when she lands, her right foot lands towards the left hand side of the stop board because it's being dragged through by her upper body to a certain degree. And one of the key things to look for is obviously that foot landing. Once you've delivered the ball, then it comes down to how do you stay in. And one of the things I always say to Lily is like, what's that thing on the top of your neck? And she goes, it's my head. No, it's not. It's a 6 kilogram weight. Everywhere you look at that, your body's going to fall once you've delivered the pot. So looking back into the circle, stepping back in is an important part of that recovery after you've delivered the ball. And that's you might see some rotational element at that point, but hopefully the point up until the ball's released should be as linear as possible.
Okay, so the question in from a different Paul. So there's one. I asked whether anyone had any observations and reflections on what they were seeing within Lily's throw that you played through. So he's talking about, mentioned here that she noticed she was popping up rather than driving horizontally. So something that you described as well. So can you recommend any drills or exercises to help work on that? So that linear drive across the circle.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I like to use something called an A drill, to recover. So I do it usually in stages. So you start them in the preparation phase, and you get to I would say an unseat. So they start dropping back to the front. As they drop back, I get them into a long A position with the left leg as long as possible, coming up onto the right heel. So they get used to dropping down and across, rather than popping up. And then I usually couple that with the third phase, which is them recovering the right leg under their body in order to provide the impetus that right leg has got to move fast. So I'll do them so they can get used to the appreciation for the position. I probably then move on to some dry drills. And to be quite frank, I started talking very technically with Lily about 1990s and stuff like that. She's a smart girl, and she basically looked at me like I was talking Swahili to her. So we got to the point where I transitioned from something that was talking about very technical terms into something that was like, think about low, think about flowing movement, think about staying low towards a circle, think about energy transfer horizontal, that sort of stuff. And she begins to get the grasp of it. And I think there was the other key part of what we worked on is making sure that right heel was the push point out the back, not the toe. Because if it's a toe push, more than likely you're going to get airborne. You want to get really back. You want to drop to the point where that right heel comes up. So it's really getting the athlete comfortable with that drop phase first, then getting them thinking about more explosive movement across. And then we coupled that right at the end with some banded glides, where I held a resistance band and she held the other on the left hand, so we can start getting her used to applying force in that position and driving off that right leg.
I've used similar things. My group aren't necessarily as clever as Lily, but so I try to use some constraints with them. So I've had them driving underneath a high jump flexi bar, so they have to drive low across the way rather than driving up and popping over. So things like that, where there's a constraint involved, sometimes helps as well. Yeah, just if you wanted mine, but. Other questions in. So, question from Christopher. So, where does the push start within the throw? So, I think he means referring to like, when does the athlete actively think about pushing with their upper body?
So, when they think and when it does start are two different things. I would say, I think most athletes start thinking push too early. So you see a lot of athletes going across the circle, thinking about smacking the ball before they've even got the left foot on the floor. What you end up seeing is them kind of just basically losing all contact with the ball, opening up or dropping over the left foot. In my opinion, it's that the push really starts once you've got both feet on the floor and you've created that stretch reflex across the chest when the left arm has come round and it's beginning to come into that strong deceleration of the left hand side. So to me, that's when the push should begin to happen. What I would say is that, and this is something that I think I've embraced probably in the last couple of years, is that when you're looking at shot put, it's really good to start talking about that push phase and kind of when you're going to punch the ball. The bigger things for me is actually what the velocity of the ball does across the circle. So if there's any periods in that where the path of the shot looks unnatural or it looks less efficient, or when there's pauses in the delivery where it stops moving, to me that's almost as important as when you drive that shot put. So I would encourage you delaying that push on a I would say a junior or developmental athlete for as long as possible, or until they've developed the stretch reflex across their chest by opening the left arm out, is a good process. But also get them thinking about the whole movement and what it means across the velocity of the shot across the whole movement.
So in the overall part of the framework, I think you reference like the sequential action. So it needs to go from the legs up through the body. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Question from Cheryl. So I think it was, you mentioned a little bit of this before when you're talking about Lily sort of spinning out at the front. So she's got a young male athlete that finds the circle too small and therefore insists on rotational speed after the throw. And she's just wanting to know whether you've got any suggestions to try and help her out.
So, I mean, I think if you look at some of the best male shot putters, you got Majewski, like I think 6'10", wasn't he? Something stupid, and you've got
620, I think. Yeah, he was massive.
620. You got Ulf Timmerman, who was a unit as well. I was at the European under-20s last year and with Lewis, and Lewis was competing against two guys, one from Lithuania who was 6'10", and one from Poland which was 6'11", and they're competing in the same 2.35 meter shot circle. So I would say that it's the shot circle is not too small for the athlete. I would look at fundamentally what do their movement patterns look like. When I see athletes eating too much circle when they're going across, it's usually because of two things. Number one, they're left-sided dominant. They're trying to kick too hard out the back. In reality, the left leg is really a guide and a little bit more passive than most people think it is. And it's really about driving off the right foot and getting the right foot under you. Maybe changing that thought process and getting them thinking about right foot push rather than a left foot kick. And I've done that before with athletes where I said 10 throws, 25% on your left foot, 75% on your right foot. That's the sort of profile I want to see in energy exertion. And then swapped it over at other points as well and did the opposite just to give them a feel of what both of them feel like. And I think the other one is a process of kind of what the trajectory of their movement looks like. I would say that they're probably not getting to a good 90-90 and they're driving up with a very aggressive left leg, which is pushing them out the circle. So maybe looking at kind of what the plane of movement looks like and also kind of looking at what side is dominant during the movement.
Do you ever do any sort of left leg lock work so that it's only, you can't use your left leg at all? So you've just got to lock it out straight behind you, like you have no knee, drop and then drive purely off that leg, and it kind of forces you down into the board.
I usually try and say, I threaten them with amputation sometimes, but I don't think that's a good coaching tool to use. But I would say I haven't looked at locks. What I do try is and say, look, I want you to focus, try to direct focus to different areas, trying to get them thinking heavily about what the right foot's doing rather than what the left leg is doing. And I think that has been more beneficial for me personally. But I think there's a ton of different ways of doing this, and it really comes down to what's most effective for you and your athlete.
Fair enough. Good question in here from Bill. How difficult is it to coach your daughter? How has the relationship process gone? So now this is something that quite a few people have had to sort of deal with over the years.
Oh, yeah.
How have you managed to do it and do it effectively? I mean, you said that she was consistently hitting, was it 1590 to 1620
Yeah.
in that? So you're clearly doing something well. I know she's chosen her parents well in terms of genetics and stuff, but how are you finding that relationship?
Is she on the call? Can I be honest? I'll be honest with you. It's a real tough thing. A few things. So first of all, we went through some really phases where it's really hard to differentiate between what happens at the athletics track and what happens back home, and we brought a lot of arguments home. I think partially it's me as a coach. I'd set a really high standards because I know what she's capable of, and I wasn't willing to accept bad days from her, and I think that's part of a failing that I had. And at the same time, I think that she was developing as an athlete, and her attitudinal kind of processes were developing as well, and I didn't take that into account. I think at the moment we've got in a really good place because I think my communication styles as a coach have improved, and I'm able to actually understand what makes her tick as an athlete, and I think that's a key message that I took from this whole process. And I think the other thing for me as well is that understanding how your athlete develops is a really important part of this. Lily's not the sort of athlete that goes through steady, gradual change. She's the athlete that hits a wall, plugs at it for 3 months, and then has this massive bang moment when it kind of clicks, and then she goes north. And when I've got to the point where I'm extremely frustrated and I'm saying, what the hell am I doing here? I can't make a difference here. I might as well just go and give up. I've had a network of really good coaches that I've had the ability to actually tap into. Gary Harrington, Mark Chapman, and and others as well. I've asked questions of Dale Stevenson and Don Babbitt and people like that, where I've got stuck with different people, and also Nick on the call here was sharing ideas. I think having that phone a friend just to get a different perspective and a third party understanding of kind of what you're trying to do has really helped me in understanding there are different ways of skinning the cat. And one of the ones I would say is that I struggled for ages to try and get Lily into an active reverse. Tried all sorts of different things with her, phoned up Gary, and Gary said, try this. And within 15 minutes, she was active reversing. It was one of the most heartbreaking moments for a coach. And he said, look, this is where the wise words from Gary came in. He said, just remember that all the work you've done before then has led to this process. So she might not have been able to do that unless you've done all those bits before. So I would say, just kind of having a bit of reflection about your own coaching style, making sure there's a divorce between the track and the home, and then having a good network of support coaches that you can delve into when you get frustrated.
I think that's really, really good advice. It's good to see your relationship sort of evolve with it. And I think the bit you talked about listening to the advice from other coaches and things like that, but I think you listen to Lily really well. And you can see that in a session. I think Lily's got a really good understanding of what she's trying to achieve. And that comes through you actually listening to her about what she wants to, what she wants to do and what goals she's got with it. So I think that's always been it's also been an interesting sort of thing to witness within your sessions.
Thanks.
Okay, so question from Dave Calloway. What would you recommend Lee do to get her drive off her heel? So this is often a thing that people try and get people to focus on. So that full extension when you're going backwards is off your heel. So how do you cue it, or how do you?
So it kind of almost happens naturally if you get in the right positions. So for me, Lily, there was a couple of things that we had to work on. So first of all, it was really about the mobility she had with her hip, quad. So her hip and her quad was so tight that she couldn't get to that full compression and flexion to 90 degrees easily. It used to kind of, and then when she got to it, she couldn't actually generate power out of it because it was too tight and it was under tension rather than being kind of athletically relaxed and able to explode out of that position. And the second one was obviously a right foot mobility. So the things that we've done, and I wish I had a video of her from the last few sessions where she's now pushing off her right foot with twofold. First of all, getting the physiology right so that she can actually achieve it, and then just changing kind of the angle of attack of what her hips were doing really helped us kind of understand and get her naturally into that position. So as soon as she started sitting back into it and thinking about sitting a butt on the stop board rather than jumping up in the air and landing, and kind of that when we talked about earlier, that cue of flowing horizontally through the throw rather than kind of this loopy sine wave, she started naturally coming into that heel push position. But I think to me the biggest thing for me was like trying to get a understanding horizontal push, and then once she's getting horizontal push, saying stay on your right for longer, get onto the heel, stay on it longer, don't come off of it too quickly. So staying on the right longer and then recovering it quicker. So getting her the right plane of movement, physiology, staying on the right longer, and then coming under harder into her body. That's what worked for me.
Great advice again. Okay, so we've got just one more question coming in, and that's to ask for your email again so you can get some of the slides. So just to once again reiterate, the slides and the recording of this presentation are going to go on Athletics Hub. I know if people do want the videos that Stuart's used within this, I'm sure he's happy to sort of share them via email as well. So just drop him an email. So it's, do you want to put it up the presentation?
Yeah.
On there, isn't it? If I try and get to it. But it's scarlaw@englandathletics.org. There you go.
Happy to send you out the frameworks as well that we worked on here, so you can peruse and do whatever you need with.
Yeah. So just conscious of time now. So if there are any more questions, we know we could talk about shot put forevermore. If there are any more questions, if you want to flag them now. If not, yeah, reach out to Stuart after this or myself, and I'll pass them on or whatever, answer where I can. If not, thanks very much for coming. Really appreciate your time and all the work that you guys are doing. So hope you found it useful.
Keep shot.
Yeah, and let us know how you find using this framework. Yeah, we're really, really interested. I know Stuart's mentioned it before, but we are really, really interested in kind of how it goes. Is it useful? Does it provide sort of a good reflection on where that athlete is, and focus your attention to, I need to focus on X, Y, Z to improve them from a technical perspective?
I would say is we've got one next week as well on rotational shot. We'll take the same process to a rotational shot put.
Yeah, we'd have them for all of the throws now. So
cool.
Caroline, yeah, you can have the slides. That's not a problem at all. They'll be on Athletics Hub as a PDF. I've got my email ready to send out, so it gets uploaded. So just as people are dropping off, you'll get sent. You'll be asked for some feedback, and like I say, we do always listen to the feedback. We try and sort of evolve what we're doing, make them as good as possible for you guys. So please, your candid feedback is always very much appreciated as we try to develop this service and try to give you guys the best we possibly can. So please answer it honestly. So is there any more questions coming in? Say now or forever hold your peace. If not, I will just stop the recording. Yeah, I'll stop the